Well, I'm a Canuck. So I was born in Canada, Vancouver, BC. Grew up in a wonderful home, great parents. Um, didn't have a lot of money. My dad was the breadwinner. My mom would work. She would take kids in to supplement income.
Like babysitting?
Yeah, babysitting. She was known as the bun lady, but I think in the U.S. you call them rolls. But every morning at 6 a.m. she was baking, and the house always smelled wonderful. And the whole neighborhood loved to come over and have fresh buns and jam, because she also made the fresh jam. And so she was a stay-at-home mom, and I appreciated that. I'm the oldest of three. I have a sister and a brother, and they're still in Canada. We had a great life.
So let's talk about, so I have a daughter that's 8. And what was like when I hear a lot of young boys' experience, it was playing outside, playing sports. What was your experience like when you were in that before teenage years?
Sure. Outside. I didn't have a lot of screen time. I remember doing a lot of little skits and stuff, and having all the neighborhood kids come over, and my sister and I. And I knew then I was good at selling, because my sister was shy and didn't like to talk, and I would make her act with me. So we would have those little plays for the neighborhoods. And I remember just riding my bike everywhere. And at one point we lived a little bit more rural. We had moved out of Vancouver, and going into the fields and getting chased by bulls, and just outdoors.
Yeah, and that's one thing that modern psychologists are saying today with kids is they don't have enough playtime.
Too much screen time.
Too much screen time, not enough playtime. And playing is interacting with other kids, and you just learn how to be socially and interact with other people. You learn that because if you want something, you can try to force other people to do it, or you can sell other people to do it. And these are all things that a lot of kids are missing out on.
Yeah.
And that's just a common thing back then, is that was the only option.
Yeah.
Was to go play.
Yeah. And it was great. It was great. My dad built houses for himself, not for other people. So we moved quite a bit. And I remember...
so he would build it, you would live in it, and then he would sell it. He never rented them out?
No.
You should have.
He was very conservative. He was a very quiet man. Didn't speak a whole lot. But very dry humor. And
would you say you had a good relationship with him?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, eventually when I got to selling cars, it was always, did you sell something? What are you doing? So we moved when I was 12, and I didn't mind moving. I liked moving.
Yeah.
Because I liked meeting new people, having new friends, starting over in a new place. I think maybe that's kind of weird, but I did. And then we moved to acreage when I was 12, and we had cows and a horse and acreage.
So did he build that home as well?
Yeah.
So you bought farmland?
Yeah, acreage. It wasn't really farmland. Hobby farm, we called it, because we could put animals on it.
This is all in Canada?
Yeah, my parents never moved out of Canada. I moved as an adult.
What were your middle school years like? Did you ever start having conflict or drama in your middle school years, or was it always just relatively happy? Not like a lot of kids today talk about how difficult these years can be. And
totally. And I think what saved me, because I did some stupid stuff as a kid, I could tell my mom anything. So if I had, if I did something dumb, I could go to her, tell her. She was never demeaning, very understanding. So she was my friend. And I think that helps, because, sometimes you feel guilty and you want to get rid of that guilt, and rather than keep carrying it and keep doing stupid stuff, if you tell somebody, you kind of nip it. And that's, I think, very helpful with my relationship.
When you were in Canada, did you ever think like, I want to move to America, I like America, or is just you're happy?
That wasn't even on the radar. No. I figured I'd live my whole life in Canada. So, yeah. No, that was never... I didn't even want to... Once I met my husband, who was American, and he would talk about moving to the States, I was like, no.
Yeah, we'll get to that part when you're meeting your husband. So,
yeah.
high school, same. Did you play sports or anything like that in high school?
I was musical. So I played piano. I played piano for the choir because my cousin was the choir director. So I got roped into a lot of stuff. Singing, art. I loved art. So I was always in art. Wasn't, other than outside activities for myself, skiing and stuff like that, I wasn't on a team per se.
So a pivotal point in people's life is when they are graduating high school and they're thinking about the future. Did you have a hope, a desire? Did you have dreams of what you wanted to do when you got older?
What was I at 18? We in Canada, in the US, you just graduate and you're most people are thinking, what school am I going to next? What is my degree going to be? What is my career path? In Canada, not so much. My nieces and nephews have all done things, but a lot of trades, firemen, construction, electricians, or yeah. So I wasn't really thinking of the degree and the path so much. I went to work. I got a job. Didn't really focus on the career at that point in my life.
And the point I asked that, I think that's normal and that's okay because a lot of times young people they feel like society puts all this pressure on them to have life figured out. It's like you're barely an adult.
Right.
I think you should be just focused on living.
Yeah.
And in the process of living, things start.
And I think it's good to go get the degree. Because I think when you get into the work world right away, you start incurring debts and obligations, which makes going back to school harder. So I think all my kids went and got their degrees, and I think that definitely helps them. I don't think you cannot not succeed without it. I think you can find a path without that degree too. A lot of people have.
If you get into the trades, yeah, you have to learn a skill.
Skills.
Is essentially, and the issue with college today, I have college degrees, is the degree does matter. So a lot of people today are getting degrees that have almost no real value to them. And so they're coming out with all this debt.
Yeah.
And then they literally can't do anything with that degree. Right. So then it's like you would have been better off not going to college and just going to go learn a more practical skill.
Sure. Yeah,
versus some piece of paper that says he went to school for 4 years. Right. Now he can still work at Starbucks.
Yeah. And I think life adventures are important too. Go travel or do a missions adventure or an overseas adventure or something to see how the world works and just get outside your bubble.
So were you given that opportunity when you were 18?
I met my husband young. So at the time I was deciding to go to Germany with my sister, and I didn't go. I stayed. I kept working.
So you finished high school, got a job. What was that first job like?
I was more accounting or reception or whatever, like an entry level in a glass company. And then I moved to a brick company that I did accounts receivables for. And then I got a really good job working for a huge company doing profit and loss accounting. And I just did accounting degrees as I went to kind of keep moving up in that position.
Nice. So I have a lot of nieces that are either young adults or coming to that age. And I guess what's your advice to like young girls at that 18 to 22 that their goal is to just actually get married and have kids? Mm-hmm. But what do you do in the interim?
Right. I think that was my goal. I did want to get married, and I wanted to have 4 kids. I knew that from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So when
you're waiting for Mr. Perfect or Mr. Right,
which is, I think you need to have a list of what that is. You need to be very specific. Finding what you want to do, because if you're going to have a job, you need to like it.
Yeah.
If you like people, then be in retail, or if you like kids, find a place to work with kids. If you like animals, find out what you want to do, or what you like to do, because if that's not your career path, then and try to find something that pays.
Yeah, so your life doesn't, like, the more I think about it, as a advice I'd give to a young man is probably slightly different than advice I'd give to a young woman. And for a young woman, it's like your life doesn't have to be on pause until you're waiting for that individual.
No.
Continue to live life, learn some skills, also work on yourself, work on understanding yourself, understanding your emotions. So there's all these things that you can do in the interim versus just, where's this guy that I'm supposed to marry?
Yeah.
It's kind of where I'm leaning towards.
Yeah. You want to always be improving yourself, growing, learning. You don't have to learn in a book, but you can. Exposing yourself to situations.
So did you ever go to college?
No, I just took the accounting courses.
Nice. So, I mean, so you learned a skill, and then if you needed more knowledge in that particular skill, you just went and did that thing versus in college, you're learning about all this other stuff, right? When I went to college, I took Oceanography 101, right? It's just all, I took I had this one class where I had to listen to instruments from Africa and then know what country in Africa it came from and the name of that instrument. And I'm like, when am I ever going to like do anything with this? Where for you, it's like, hey, Debbie, we need you to know how to do this thing so you can help us in our business. That makes a lot more sense to me. So when did you meet your husband?
We met, I was 19. We met in a singing group. So I'm alto because my voice as well. And he's tenor. And just got to know each other that way through a mutual friend that brought us into the singing group together.
So how long did you guys date for?
Our first dates were great. Our first date was with my sister and her boyfriend at the time, and we tandem biked around Stanley Park.
If
you ever want to do that, that's the best thing to do.
Well, when I see it, I was like, I would never do that. So that's the one. No, that's the one where you're on the same bike with two seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good. I think me and my wife would be like, I want to go that way.
Well, whoever's in front is in charge. And it's a seawall around the park, so you kind of have to go in one direction. You have to go on the seawall.
Yeah.
So you can't go in different directions.
Yeah.
That was and a picnic, and it was January.
So it's chilly. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had a picnic outside. And then our first real date, he made dinner.
Wow. And how long did you guys date for?
A year and a half.
And how did you know he was the one?
I had that list.
And what was on that list?
Or
I guess
he had to be a man of faith. He had to love God first. Put that first. He had to have a good sense of humor. Know where he was going in life. There was a lot of things. Personality.
So what general advice would you give to women that are creating this list? Not necessarily your list, but just particular things.
Because you don't ever want to be in a place where you make a decision that goes against what you believe or what you really want. And that can change with the person. And of course, nobody's going to fit a box.
Where'd you get the list idea from? Did someone give you that advice?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
I think I just did it. I think I just felt
because I've heard other people like Tony Robbins says that. And so obviously he probably got it from his mentor. But that's one thing that they give advice. That's the advice they give is know yourself and then create the list so that when you are interacting with other people, you're like, no. Versus a lot of people, it's easy to fall in love with someone for a day, but then you actually want to know, okay, what's behind the substance of this?
Right. We told our kids that they couldn't get married within 2 years of meeting somebody because there's that honeymoon effect. The person's always going to be putting the best foot forward. Yeah. You need to get to know them beyond just.
Well, I violated that one.
Oops. Well, I kind of did too a year and a half. But we. Yeah.
Yeah. There's principles, but then you can always make exceptions to that based off of.
Of course. Yeah. We just like the idea of them not ever rushing into a situation or making an emotional decision like that.
Yeah.
There's emotions, obviously, you're in love, but you want to have a bigger picture. And in our early years of marriage, we did a lot of sales together, like,
How'd you do that?
like Amway or
Oh, you
We
did
were
a lot.
those type of people. We were
Yeah.
both,
The MLM stuff.
yeah, we wanted to make more income than just a job would make. And those programs, as hard as they are, they tell you to create a dream board, like to know what you want with your life. And I think that's important. Not only the list I made for my future husband that I didn't know yet, but I think going forward for plan just your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a direction. It doesn't necessarily work exactly like a dream board, but at least you know what you want your life to look like. We knew family was important. Traveling would be important.
How long did you? So you got married. You were like almost 21 at that point. And then how long did you wait before you had your first kid?
3 years.
3 years. So you had
We
3
told
years.
ourselves 5, but
Yeah, yeah. So you had 3 years of really getting to know each other. Do you remember what those first years of marriage were like? Fun, easy, hard, all the above?
all of the above. I think that every marriage is going to have all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting to know each other, making moves. You move a lot when you're young. We did anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Apartment here, house here.
Yeah. And then you were able to work together too,
Yeah.
which
A little bit
I don't know if me and
later.
my wife could do that.
Yeah.
We can barely work in the kitchen together.
Yeah. In our life, we've definitely had our paths. You know, I do the things and he does his things, and that works. He's, then trying to piggyback on top of each other and do each other's things. But,
Yeah.
like he's the yard man and I'm the
Yeah,
But yeah, that can be a challenge. But it also makes you have to work hard together and be on point together. And
So then, when you had that first kid, how did that change your life?
quit my job. And in Canada, you get a year paid with the baby.
So the government will pay you.
So I had a year off, and nobody goes back. Oh, well, I guess people go back. I didn't.
Now they do, but back then,
I knew I wanted to stay home, have my little guy.
so you were 24 at that point. So you had your first at 24, and then you just weren't in the workforce for a good while after that. Really focused
14
on
years. He was 14 years old when I went back to work.
Yeah, so really focused on the family, being a good mom, good wife,
Yeah,
all the homemaking stuff.
sure.
And I think today's society, we don't celebrate that enough because it is a very important role.
Yeah.
In my household, which is now not the norm, my wife does not work.
That's okay.
She homeschools
Yeah.
and she takes care of the home. And I joke with people, but it's true. She works harder than me. She's on call 24/7, right? If a child needs help at 3 a.m, they're not coming to me. They're going to her and being like, hey, this happened.
Right.
They're older now, so it's
Easier.
she's not on call 24/7. But yeah, those first few years,
Brutal. Yeah, I had 4 within 5 years.
yeah, that's a lot. We had 4 within 5 years, give or take, 6 years, something like that. So for women that are thinking about having children or have young children, did you? I have a lot of friends with children, and I just see a lot of bad parenting out there.
It's tough.
Yeah,
Today it's really tough because it's hard to have a mom stay home
yeah,
to afford that because it's expensive. Everything's expensive. Childcare is really expensive too.
yeah,
So if you can stay home, but a lot of times you just can't.
yeah,
And then that puts a lot of pressure because now your time isn't spent with them. So your time spent with them, you don't want to be disciplining. You don't want to be the heavy. And there's the guilt that comes with that too, I think, to have less time with your kids. So, yeah. And there's been a lot of paradigm shifts over the years. Like my oldest is 40.
yeah,
Right? So that's a long time ago. Staying home wasn't as unusual as it is today. So I think the pressure there, I think it's hard to parent. And I think society really puts too much on the child, too much important. Not that they're not important, but that they should be making decisions. They're children. They shouldn't be making decisions. Not about big stuff. You slowly teach them how to make good decisions. But you can't make good decisions as a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old
Right.
about your life, for sure, because there's not enough. You don't have enough maturity to do that.
Yeah, I try to look at the big picture on parenting, and I'm not going to tell people one way is right and one way is wrong, but generally, if you have a certain type of style, it leads to a certain type of outcome.
Right.
I'm not going to say right or wrong, but I'm not going to name any names of my current people that I know, but it's like in our household, and it's probably very similar to yours, it was the child is not the center of the world. The child is a part of our family.
Right.
And then therefore you're welcome into our family, but you're going to do what we have and what we're part of. Mm-hmm. And so for us, the reason why we were able to have multiple kids is because, hey, welcome to the family. Here are the rules. This is how we live by. And if you don't live by those rules, we're not going to kick you out, but there's going to be consequences to that. Right. Where I look at a lot of parenting today, it's the child is the center of the world. Mm-hmm. And then if you add multiple, now you have multiple universes and they're all colliding. There's like a lot of conflict.
Yeah. I think parents need help. When I was young, I had the church, my family, and I was very committed to focus on the family. So a lot of reading, a lot of radio programs.
So that's key. You knew that you didn't know. Mm-hmm. So you went out to go learn more.
Always.
And I think that's a thing that parents aren't doing today, where they're not going out and getting different ideas, because we are so caught up in ourselves, we think we know what's best. And it's like, people have been doing this thing for 10,000 plus years. This whole parenting thing, you don't know everything. Go learn about it so you can become a better parent. So that's interesting that you did go out. And was it hard for you to accept advice from your mom or your parent, or you're like, or you welcomed it if other people gave advice?
Sure. I mean, at that in your 20s, you think you know everything.
Yeah.
You do. But I was open to learning. So if my mom wanted to give me advice, I would be definitely open to that. We have a lot of support with that.
Did you see? Was there a particular philosophy that you used on your own, being a mom and a parent, or back then? I don't know if there was particular philosophies that was more prevalent, or here. I guess here's my other question. Being a parent myself now, it's hard for us to find other parents that we think they're actually doing a good job. But back then, would you say it was more of the norm where most parents were good?
I think it was more normal to have the kind of nucleus we did. My husband, when our kids were little, he was actually a youth pastor in a church.
Your husband was?
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think that for discipline for kids, I think routine. Having a routine for them, especially when they're little, helps them live within a known parameter. And as Dobson used to say, if you stick your toe over the parameter, there has to be a consequence.
So James Dobson?
Yeah. So you can't say, don't do this, and then let them do it. If you're going to, and pick your battles. If you're going to set rules or expectations, then have them doable. Because if you're going to have a consequence to it, you don't want a consequence every 5 minutes. You want to set up something that's structured that they can expect and then follow through.
Yeah. And that's how we live our life. We use the concept of baby wise, where everything's scheduled. If we as adults, we have a schedule, life is routine, and if you build that into the child, then they understand, hey, at this time this happens, this time this happens. And you're giving them boundaries. You don't have to be strict, but you're just, hey, here's boundaries. It's like we have a fence. You don't go outside the fence because you could get hurt or lost or whatever. And the boundaries are there for your safety, right, not so you can't have fun. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of parents I'm encountering, they're all into this no boundaries, let the kid experiment, try.
But that gives them, I think we want security. Kids want security.
Right.
To know they're loved, they're accepted, so to not give them boundaries is actually throwing them to the wolves. That they won't feel secure. They won't feel secure. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we have a lot of kids with depression and anxiety. it's such a sad thing to see. I talk to a lot of people, and they're on antidepressants. They're on so much medication. And that's a whole other subject. Because they want to know, they want to feel safe, secured, and build their self-esteem. That's so important as a parent. My parents weren't strict, loving, accepting. The expectations, because we were raised in a Christian home, was, teach up a child in the way they shall go. Teach them, and when you know what's right and wrong, you know when you're crossing the boundaries and not doing. That's why I said I could go to my mom when I did the wrong things, because I knew what was good for me. And I think kids don't know what's good for them, and so you make bad decisions, and we make bad decisions in life. That's why we have forgiveness. So not to give the child that safety net, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. In society today, we've removed God. So once you remove God, then who is your God now? And
there's no absolutes then.
Yeah.
There's got to be rights and wrongs and ethics. So you have to find a way to bring that into your family, and people do without God. But at the end of the day, to think that you're it, like you said, the center of the world. We're not the center of the world. We don't control anything. We have today. That's all we have. We have this moment. That's all we have. So you need to use it wisely. I hope what I'm doing today is doing that. Yeah, I think the kids just need to have something bigger than themselves. So the family nucleus is the support, and then to know that there's a bigger picture, a bigger plan.
Yeah, it's so crazy because this is all like, it seems like common sense, and yet we're struggling as a nation. And even in religious communities, they're struggling because they're taking advice from the PhDs and the doctors and all these people with degrees.
Sure.
But if you what's at their core belief, and a lot of things go back to believe in something greater than yourself. If you don't, then you are the greatest person, and
Then you're God.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. And so, where do people go, especially if you're not part of even in Christian community, a lot of people are failing at life. And then if you're not even in a community like that, then where do people go to learn these things? Because you have to take it upon yourself to go learn. And I think that's one of the biggest things I tell young people. It's, yes, I have a bachelor's and 2 masters, but all the learning I've done was not in college. If you ask me one thing I learned in college, I can't tell you anything at this point. I have an MBA, but what I did to go do is go learn. I'm always learning. I'm always listening to this, listening to that. And it all eventually kind of comes together. But you just have to continually be learning. And I think that's something that, like I'll talk to friends, when's the last time you read a book? And they'll say never. You're like, what? And so you just, it's not that you have to read a book, but now it's podcasts and stuff like that. But
there's lots of ways to learn.
Continually be learning. And if you're not, yeah, well, yeah, I don't know if that's a good way to learn.
Yeah, it can be dangerous.
But yeah, what you're saying to me sounds like good common sense, but we've lost that somewhere.
We have. Yeah, there's book smarts, and then there's street smarts. And you want to have a balance. You want to learn, but then you want to experience it in life.
Yeah. So once you had so I have 4 kids. You have 4 kids. What was it like? For me, getting that 4th kid that's when it was easy but harder because like we need everything to be bigger.
Yes.
Bigger house, bigger car.
Right.
And
there's a 5-passenger.
Yeah. So that's when it was like, oh, okay, everything need to get bigger. But for you, I'm assuming adding each kid probably wasn't as crazy because they each just became part of the family, right?
The third was, I think the third is the breaking point.
Yeah.
You can have 10 after 3.
Yeah.
Because 3, you lose one per,
Yeah, the 1-to-1. Yeah.
The ratio. And yes, you need But I always wanted 4 kids. I loved it. I enjoyed every minute of it. So
Yeah, we're not
I
celebrating
don't
that
know
enough.
what else I would have done if I had 5.
We're not celebrating that enough in society today. We're not celebrating motherhood.
And it's my greatest accomplishment. I love what I do for work. It's been the best career that I ended up with. But at the end of the day, what am I proudest of? My kids and my 7 grandkids.
Yeah.
But that is, I created them
Yeah.
and nurtured them, and now I get to watch them nurture their children and have their lives. So, yeah, and they're eternal. We're all
and that's a really good message, because there's so many young girls today. The messaging they're getting from other people, it's go be a boss babe, go do all those things, and then they'll wake up in their late 30s and they're like, oh, why am I not happy or satisfied? Why do I feel this tinge of depression? And it's like, oh, because I didn't do what was biologically inside of me to go do. Not that everyone has to have a child,
no, someone.
but it is pretty built into us to have that need and desire to be a homemaker or.
I can't imagine not having kids.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Well, they're saying there's a lot of women in their 40s who can no longer have kids, who get an education so they can play with other people's kids and then teach them things that may, well, the problem is they're teaching them doctrine that may not align with the parents. That's why you're having this clash of what kids are being taught in school versus, I don't know if the parents really believe that. So what made you decide to go back to work in your 30s?
We needed money. We had our kids in private school, in a Christian school. And there was always more month than money. So it was time for me to do something. And my husband was actually the one that suggested what I did. Because I had gone from accounting to 14 years. And when I left accounting, we still had a mainframe. And I'd come to work with my my spreadsheets. And I looked at, if I went back to accounting, well, I have to learn this and this, and I have to, because the computer world had completely changed.
Yeah.
So, and sit at a desk and make a very specific wage, which wasn't great then. And I'd always done some little bit of sales with the kids. Like at home, I would do, well, we did the Amway thing, but I did, I do Avon door to door to meet my neighbors. I was always trying little stuff. Never making good money at it, but just doing something in the sales world. So when it came time to go back, it was like, well, should I do real estate? And my husband said, why don't you look at car sales? And I thought, car sales? And my impression of car sales is you would drive by a dealership would be to look at the dealership and see 3 or 4 guys outside smoking. And I'm like, and the connotation was the vultures, right?
Yeah.
But that? I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
But we had a family dealership. My brother would do a lot of, he was a wheeler dealer, and he would always bring people to
Let's get to that. We skipped the part why you moved to America.
Oh, I hadn't then.
Oh, you're still in Canada?
No, we're still in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. We're raising our kids in Canada. Near family.
Okay, so continue, sorry.
Yeah. So I started selling cars in Canada.
Okay.
To the family dealership that my brother had a relationship. My dad had bought a Lincoln there. It was a Ford Lincoln store. Very reputable.
Was it hard to get hired, or were you like...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went in to get hired, or went in to meet managers and have interviews, and I was a green pea. I had no experience.
It's a pretty male-dominated industry, right?
Yeah, didn't see any women there. But I knew the owner's name. So I asked to meet him, and he came down and met me, and I said, yeah, I'm looking to sell cars. And he said, well, if there's nothing here, you should go see my son at my other store. And I think in between that time, they had told me, we might consider if you take a selling course. So I had no money. We didn't have extra money, and it was $1,000 to do a week of
Which was a lot back then.
Auto sales. So I went every day, left my kids, went and got trained, which without hands-on, I don't know.
At the dealership or at the $1,000 course?
At the course. So it wasn't...
Who was the trainer back then? Was it a Grant? Who was before
Well,
Grant Cardone?
it wasn't somebody big.
Oh,
It
okay.
was just a school in a auto mall
Okay.
that would take in. Yeah. So I did
Do you
that.
remember anything they talked about?
No. You know what I
Rapport.
remember them talking about was the dealership I wanted to work for and how great they were and how great that family was.
So
So
you
I was
spent
like,
$1,000 for them to tell you this is a good
that's
deal.
where I want to work. How did I had already been there? And I went back after the course and they said, "Oh, we just don't have anything." And I'm like, "Oh, you have nothing for me to do, and you just made me spend $1,000."
Yeah.
So that's when I think I met Mr. Dams, and he sent me down to his other store, and I met with the managers there, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll see what we can find you." And I'm like, I went around the corner to a little, I call it today, a pot lot, just a lot that doesn't have a manufacturer's backing, right? Just
Yeah.
they're selling they're usually selling cars to people who have bad credit and they get them done and
Yeah.
whatever. So I need a job. And somehow I went around the corner and started working for this little place, which actually became a reputable dealership. But
Yeah.
at that point, it had a bad reputation.
So let me ask you this. People today just seem to have a negative connotation of car sales people.
Sure.
Was that a thing back then as well?
The vultures.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My thinking was I wanted to make it an enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as good as it could be.
Yeah.
Probably naive at the time.
Well, sometimes we have to have optimistic naivety. And that's the thing about youth is if you tell them how hard something is, then they won't do it. But if you believe in them, there's still a chance it'll fail, but it's okay to be optimistic
And that's okay
and
to
naive.
feel,
Yeah.
because you're going to learn. Everything's
So that was your first. So getting into the industry was hard. Sounds like.
Yeah.
And I think a learning lesson from that is again for young people, for anyone, it's just because you want something doesn't mean the doors will open up easily.
No.
Because some people will say,
Those things are a
"Oh,"
struggle.
most people will say, "Oh, the door's closed, therefore it's not meant to be."
No.
And if it's
Well, if you need to make money, then you just
Yeah.
keep having to go. And within a week or two or a month, I don't remember, the manager that had said no to me saw me at that store. Well, he had just been told a bad story about the store, about a Ford Taurus or whatever it was. And he came around the corner because it was really close to that dealership and saw me and was like, "Oh, I got a call right away and I got a job right away." There.
they saw that you were serious.
Yeah.
So you only worked for that guy for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
That's funny. So part of it is they're testing to see, is this gal really serious? We don't want to invest into her until we know she's serious about it. Possibly.
Possibly, or just
That's the thing with
to rescue me.
the thing with like
Oh,
with used cars. The guy selling you the car doesn't actually know
the car.
No. Or the condition of it. And
No.
it's not is the car salesperson shady? It's more of just that's the nature of the beast when it comes to used cars. That's why I don't buy used cars. My first 2 cars were used. And after that, I was like, I'm just not going to play that game. And I didn't buy them from a dealership. I bought them from an individual.
Private party.
But yeah, I think it's more of just the game of used cars than it is. And we can talk about some of the tactics that you've seen people get used and abused by, but that's just the nature of the game with used cars. They don't really
Well, it's the
know.
one kind of industry that you can negotiate. And so people are afraid. You know, if it was, you walk in the grocery store, you don't go, "Well, I don't want to pay this for the apple. I'd like to pay this." Well,
Yeah.
that's not, most of the things in purchasing retail is just, this is a set price, go in, buy it, leave.
Right.
So that makes people very nervous.
Yeah. That you're already there's already conflict and confrontation there from the beginning. So yeah, that was only 2 weeks, and then you went and worked for this other guy, and then he was backed by a manufacturer.
Yeah, it was the Ford Lincoln dealership.
And what was that like the first year, if you can remember?
Probably not remember the first year
First season.
Yeah. I was there 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn. I always said a woman has to learn twice as much as a man in a man's world. Because if a guy said something about the truck that wasn't true, they would be taken, like they did know it and probably not fact checked.
Right.
If if I said something about it, it had to be bang on.
Yeah.
So I really studied, axles and ratios and ton weights and everything about trucks because I had to know about trucks.
Yeah. I feel like the salespeople that I see now don't really know their cars. Like
Well, it's not a career to them.
like the guy who's trying to sell me an Odyssey. I feel like I know more about the Odyssey than he does, partly because I've owned them for so long.
Right. But it's also, yes. And the person researching is researching specifically.
Yeah. It just sounds like he doesn't really know his cars. And it's like,
that's not unusual though, I think.
it's like, okay, Odyssey has, or a Honda has however many different models, but I think you would probably want to spend your time understanding the various products that you're selling. I can understand if you work for Honda, you should know Hondas. I understand they sell other cars there. You don't necessarily have to be an expert in those, right? If you're selling a used Mazda. But I think you shouldn't be looking you shouldn't be looking at the sticker the whole time.
No.
So I thought that was interesting. I don't think he'll we can talk about that transaction.
Well, and sometimes people it's a very transient business, right? You don't get people staying in one, like for me to be in one store for 14 years, very unusual.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily learn your product if you're not there very long.
So I guess in Canada, are sales done differently there than here in America? Is it pretty similar?
Similar. I couldn't make money in Canada like I
Why is that?
did here. Taxes are way higher. Way higher.
On money that you make? Mm-hmm. You know why they're higher though, right?
It's really low.
So you can go not work for a year.
Well, and you're, medical is, it's a different program.
There's a trade-off because people in America will be like, look at what Canada has to offer. And you're like my brother-in-law lives in Canada and he's like, for every dollar I make, over 50 cents goes back to the government.
Mm-hmm.
If
so
not
July
more.
1st is tax-free day.
Oh, they have one day where...
No, but that's when you've paid your 50%.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I look at it that way for myself. It's like 10 months out of the year I work for me. The other 2 months I'm working for the government.
That's not bad.
Because I paid just over close to $30,000 this year. And you're like, man, I'm literally working for the man for a month or two of my life. So you're making money, but you're just giving so much of it away.
Mm-hmm. And not making as much.
Yeah.
Our pay plan, how we were paid, wasn't great.
Mm-hmm. But you stuck at it. Mm-hmm. What made you stick to it? You enjoyed the...
Mm-hmm. Well, we needed a car. When I went back to work, we needed a car because we had been a one-car family. So car sales made sense because at that point in time, salespeople got a car.
Oh, nice. So you got a free car.
Not
or
free.
Highly discounted.
They would charge you per month on the car. And most of the salespeople got a little, Ford Focus. And that dealership was family run and they knew I had 4 kids. They gave me a van.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I had a car.
Yeah, when I work at Verizon, you get a free phone, but getting a discounted car is also a good deal.
Getting a car that you can afford.
And so, I mean, when customers probably interacted with you, it's probably different because they're like, oh, this lady isn't trying to... She's not what'd you call vulture?
Vulture. That's just an impression you get from a distance. Because most salespeople are not.
Yeah.
I kind of do what you do. I like to interview, find out what people need, find out what they're like, make a friend, help people out, and then stay in contact. So that was my goal, is to become there.
So you didn't have to go learn how to become a wordsmith, and that's what they're teaching people today. It's
to say certain things.
Play mind games with people, yeah.
Oh.
And I think that's why some people don't like the dealership, because it's like this guy named Andy Elliott. He's all over, and he's just telling people, do this, say this. I'm gonna for 2 weeks I'm gonna teach you how to shake someone's hand.
Okay.
It doesn't take 2 weeks to learn how to shake someone's hand. and then I'm gonna teach you how to look into their eyes. And then I'm gonna teach you how to... He's like, you don't have to know about the car. You just have to say these lines and they'll buy a car.
People know when they're being sold. People know when you're not authentic. So yeah, I don't salesy. I don't want to be salesy. I just want to help people make good decisions and buy the right thing for what they need.
And that's worked out for you for the past
25 years.
25 years. Yeah, good for you. So you worked there for 5 years, then what?
Then my dad passed away, and we ended up going to California for Christmas. My mom didn't want to have traditional Christmas, so all of us, our whole family, she took us paid for a trip to Disneyland to have Christmas, which was fun. And while we were there, my husband picked up a paper for jobs. And all of a sudden he was like, it's time.
Because he was American.
Yep. And he'd always talked about coming back to the US. And so, yeah.
Where'd you guys move to?
He came down here without me and the kids to test it out, took a job.
In Washington?
Lived in a van.
For how long?
So my dad died in 2000, Christmas 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
Beginning of the year, maybe.
Yeah.
And we were still up in Canada, kids in school, I'm working. And he would come down here Tuesday through Saturday and work.
Wow.
And then 9/11 hit. Remember that day. Remember exactly where I was standing at my dealership watching the planes.
Yeah, how'd that affect Canadians? Just
the world stopped.
Yeah.
It just stopped dead. I mean, our dealership, we didn't see a soul.
So it affected Canadians. Mm-hmm. Just
so close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy. And he was down. He was going over the border because it was Tuesday. He was going over the border.
They shut the border down, bro.
They shut it down right after he left. So he was
stuck.
Here. It was open by the next Saturday. But yeah, he was down here for that.
So was that difficult making that transition for you moving down here? Was there much of a culture shock, or was it like...
I don't think there's much of a culture shock. It took a while to get all of us down here. And then he bought this house in 22. So that's when I came down. I came down in 22.
22 as in...
22, 2002.
Yeah, I was
2002. Yeah.
Well, you've only been here for a couple years.
Yeah. And then I would come back and forth and meet different dealerships to try to figure out where I wanted to go. And my manager up in Canada said, well, look at Highline, look at higher end cars. So I went to BMW and Mercedes and Lexus, and I went to Ford. But there was a very sleazy dealership
So what makes a dealership sleazy?
Oh, you can tell.
But how? Like, what's the list?
I remember in the interview, and I wasn't really ready to get a job. I wanted to be interviewing them.
Yeah.
Because now I wanted to know where I was going to stay or work. And I remember the one dealership, and they were talking about how they were going to just, gross the customer and make all this money on deals, and it just felt that's not my style. I don't know. That just felt wrong.
There's a guy at the sauna.
And then the F-bombs, in the showroom from the managers, from the people on the phone. And I was like, whoa, what? Okay, no.
There's a guy at the sauna. We have heated discussions about, he works on the finance side. He was a salesman. Now he's the finance guy. And he said his mentor was, because I always joke with him, I was like, you're always just screwing over the customer. And he's like, well, that's how you see it.
Right.
But do you think the customer cares about my paycheck? I was like, they're not meant to.
No.
And so his mentality, the way he was trained was, get as much money as you can per customer.
Right.
And would you say that's most people's? Or is that a skew? Is that a small portion of sales people?
Well, as a business, it is a business. And so if you're selling a product, you have to have a margin on the product so that you stay in business.
Right. So how does one decide how much is enough to make off on a customer? Because that's where I'm like, that's why I don't buy used cars, right? So it's like they buy a car from someone for 10 grand and they turn around and try to sell it for 20. I would look at that and be like, that's a little much.
That is a lot. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just an example.
Right.
And so it's like they're going to try to sell it for 20, but they don't see it as unethical because they're like, if some sucker wants to come buy it for 20 grand, that's on them.
Well, you hope that your selling price if it's 20 is validated by the market.
Yeah.
That you're not over asking. When you take it in on trade, you have to know what that vehicle could cost you. And if it's a $10,000 vehicle, we've been putting $4,000 to $5,000 into a car because the people that had it before, you know, they didn't do all the stuff, or they did what they needed to do to that point, but it's aged to a point where it needs the bigger stuff.
Would you say good dealerships will do the work where bad dealerships won't do the work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's kind of how they...
and their margins are nice and big because they haven't invested in the car. But then the experience of that buyer is not going to be great because within a short period of time, they're going to have to be the ones investing that money that the dealership didn't do. So I think do you pay a premium? Yeah. You can buy that car off the street for less, but you might be the one putting the $4,000 to $5,000.
Yeah. So that's the part with me. And how does one determine how much of a markup should be on that vehicle, especially on used? New, there isn't much games you can play in the new, right?
Right. There's a bottom line and
there was on kind of during COVID, a lot of cars were selling well over MSRP. I don't think
90%.
I don't think Subaru did that.
It was dealer specific.
Yeah.
Some dealers did.
Did yours?
No.
Yeah, because when I bought my other Subaru, not from you, they knew, because they knew, like, hey, in 3 years when people are coming to, if you spent 90 grand on a car that was originally only worth 70, right? In 3 years and you're coming back,
you're underwater.
And so smart dealerships understood that, where other dealerships weren't thinking it's not even long term to think 3 years down the road. And so the dealerships that did oversell, they're not having customers 3 years later.
People are funny. You know, you would hope that they would recognize that Carter, as a family-run business, would not.
What does that mean? When people say family run, because that seems like
a lot of corporations that own dealerships, big corporations, big conglomerates. They have lots of dealerships, and this is just one of them. Whereas the Carters are owned by a family, sister and brother.
And so, do you think they are less? Saying you're family owned, does that make it seem like they're probably less aggressive or less? You think is that supposed to tell the customer, oh, they care about me more versus a large corporation?
So. Yeah. They care about the community more because they're in the community. Yeah, it should.
So, what made you pick the dealership that you did? We're going back to that.
When I came back?
Yeah.
I ended up going with Lexus. Why did I go with Lexus?
Can you make more on a higher end vehicle?
Sure, margins should be bigger. But then maybe you won't sell as many. I connected with the people that I met. The interview went well. I didn't like the interview with BMW or Mercedes. And I knew I wasn't going to go back to Ford. So
you went with Lexus. And then how was that different from your first initial...
From Ford?
Yeah.
Selling cars is still selling cars. Just getting to know the people and the product and making it work and making that experience. I had really great clients and they came back a lot. You know, their turnover for purchasing cars was quite quick, which it isn't at Subaru, unless you're in a lease.
Yeah. So like 2 to 4 years for Lexus.
Yeah. And I got a lot of repeat and referrals there. Built a really good business. It was 8 years there. And then we hit 2008.
So for other people thinking about getting into this industry, what I hear you saying, you don't have to be aggressive on the front end.
I don't think
if you're taking care of customers on the front end, they'll come back to you. And not only will they come back to you, but send their friends and family to you.
Yes.
And that's how...
For me, it's relationship selling.
And compared to your peers at the dealership, how did they do in comparison to you? Did they last as long? Did they get as many sales? Or were they relying more on just walk-ins?
Every dealership has a mix of all of that.
Yeah.
at Lexus when I was there. When I first started, there was the people who had been there a really long time, had a huge book of business. So I was the figuring it all out. And I was always nervous meeting new people. But yes, there's always the 80s and the 20s, right? The percenters. You'll always have the 20 percenters doing 80%.
Yeah.
It just bears itself out everywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you figured out, eventually got into the 20%, obviously. And, I mean, when you're starting off new, you're relying primarily just on walk-ins. And then just building that relationship with them. Yeah. And did you ever have a sales experience where you're like, man, that did not go well? Or that car didn't go as well as I expected? Do you have any like really negative one? Like a negative story and then a really positive story?
Man, I don't.
Or a crazy story?
There's lots that I can remember.
Is fraud a big thing in car sales? Like when I worked at Verizon, fraud was a thing you had to watch out for. Because you could accidentally sell a phone to someone that you shouldn't have.
Right.
It's probably a little harder to do that at a dealership because you're giving.
It happens. But
you're giving away this massive car.
Yeah. There's so many checks and balances today.
Yeah.
And when I was in Canada, because of the pot growing industry up there at the time, this is a long time ago, we had a lot of people coming in trying to pay cash, and you knew it was.
And you weren't. So you weren't legally able to sell them the car.
If you accidentally sold a car to somebody that was doing that, yeah, lots of investigation. I had a one, I remember, that ended up being that. So yeah, they come and investigate you and try to figure out, because you can't knowingly do that. You can unknowingly do that,
right?
If everything was done.
Because you could say I got an inheritance.
What's that?
You could say I got this inheritance with cash. I want to buy the car.
Yeah.
Interesting. The hours.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
How did you deal with? Because you're working a lot of hours.
And weekends.
And you're okay with that? Or like my buddy worked at the dealership and he's like, dude, the hours are brutal.
They are. Yeah.
Weekends, evenings.
It's not a career for everybody.
Yeah.
Because you do give up a lot. Time. Weekends.
But you just.
Makes it tough.
For you,
it's the price I pay.
Yeah. So 2008, you had to switch dealerships, or what happened then?
Well, it wasn't 2008. That's when the housing market.
Right.
Yeah. So by 2010, the dealership had changed hands. That's never a good thing. Well, it's not never a good thing, but that wasn't a good thing. And then in tough times, the dealerships tend to take away from their salespeople or their employees because you've got to cut. And I didn't think maybe that was really necessary. So the gal who had hired me at Lexus had moved 3 years earlier to Subaru. So I had kept my relationship with her and would go down and meet her at the store, and she would always tell me to come work here and I have a better pay plan, and and she had been telling me that for quite a while. And finally, when I just was like, well, things aren't great here.
So you don't have to talk about your current pay plan, no. But I'm curious, what would have been a pay plan back then? It's like someone that's getting into this industry, how do you know what a good pay plan structure is versus a bad one, especially if you're new or thinking about it? What's common pay plans?
Typically, a common pay plan will be you'll get paid up a certain amount per car up to this amount or this volume. You'll get paid a little bit more retroactive to everything if you get up to this volume, and then when you get to this one, it'll cap out at a certain car. We call it a minimum.
So it's volume based more than it is
typically, yeah,
the value of the car. So then on used cars, are you paid differently on that?
Percentage.
So
percentage of what the margin on the car is.
So that's where some probably salespeople, they want that number to be higher because they know they're going to make a higher point.
Of course.
How would you deal with that?
I don't really, I don't know what the margin is on a car. because I don't know on a used car. On a new car, yes, because that's everybody can know that. On a used car, I don't know what they took it in for, and I don't know how much they put into it.
So they don't tell you. They just say, "Hey, here's the listed price."
Yeah, the car's
And
out
then
on the
you're
lot once it's finished being reconditioned and gone through the shop. And I mean, if you know the car just had some major work, your margin's probably going to be small.
yeah,
For me, I don't want to focus on that part because I want to help the customer make the best decision. I don't want to, in my mind, go, well, that's the car I want to sell them because that's the car I'm going to make more money on.
right.
I want to sell them the best car for them. So I want them to land on the car if it's a used car. Is this the 2012 you like? And I want to tell them, I want to help them with what that car's going to do for them, what they need, what their budget is.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't really want to know.
So that's a good mindset to have.
Yeah, I just want to sell the car. And for me, it's volume.
Yeah.
So I'll make a little on this one and more on that one. Yeah.
It all evens out. So you're not so hyper focused on a particular car. You just know, hey, I got to get through so many transactions.
If I'm going to touch a person, they're going to come in looking for help. I want to help them to the point of them buying a car.
Is it a general rule? Try to sell them, like, a lot of people have the notion, maybe it's false, or like, man, once I get in there, I cannot leave. Or are the salespeople trained, don't let them leave? Because the odds of them coming back are
coming
slim.
back on the be back bus. That's what we say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been worried about that because win some, lose some. Yeah, I'll lose some.
Yeah.
But I'm not a hard sell. I'm not going to pressure or make somebody make a decision if they're not ready to.
Yeah, like that Honda guy. He texted me He texts me more than my wife. I'm like, bro, chill. I don't need a text message from you every day.
Yeah, well, being where I've been for 14 years, I've got way too much to do to bother people.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep up. I want to touch everybody that comes in. If they don't buy, that I follow up and try to figure out if there's something I can still help with or still in the market. So I want to follow up and keep in touch with people, but I don't have time to hound somebody. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you could have automation do all that as well, but I think he's handwriting the specs.
If you have an email, you can have automation do it, but that's about it.
Yeah. So now 2010, you switched to another place. Mm-hmm. Oh, so volume bases usually were, you need to sell so many cars to get
right. And most pay plans are that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then where'd you go after the 2010?
So she was at Subaru.
Okay.
The general sales manager that had been at Lexus had moved and was general manager. And we were friends. My kids all babysat her kids. Mm-hmm. One had actually nannied for her for a while.
It's the Subaru you're at now or a different one? Okay, so you've been at this Subaru for
14 years.
It's a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what do you see with the salespeople that don't last long? What are they doing wrong versus the salespeople like yourself that last longer?
I think so. Carter is a very good dealership to work for, and most people try to stay and make it work. So when people come in, I think when things change, when people leave, either they just haven't had enough success because their focus maybe is a little too distracted. They're not maybe focused on what they're doing. It's an easy job to not do anything because you're supposed to. But selling the car is having a person come in and be in front of you or call in and get them in. And so some of that's luck of the draw. You have a good phone call and somebody comes in and buys a car, or that person just totaled a car and comes in and needs a car. And so you can sell cars without a lot of work, and maybe that becomes part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Would you say the average? Does the average car guy in this area make less than 100 or more than 100? The average. Or you guys don't really know it.
I don't know.
You don't really know.
No, I don't know the industry like that. Those kind of numbers. Somebody probably does.
So for a young gal thinking about getting in, what would you tell her? If your daughter was like, "Hey, mom, I want to go do this," would you say yes or no? Like if my son said, "Hey, I want to join the military," I'd probably Try to talk them out of it.
Because you did it.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I guess military is a little different. So this Navy SEAL, this young kid came up to him. He's like, I want to be a Navy SEAL, and the Navy SEAL tells him, you'll never make it, and then the kid never tries. And he's like, the reason why I say that is if I can just say that one thing to them, and they don't think they'll make it, there's no way they're gonna make it in Navy SEAls, right?
No.
Because they're gonna say a lot worse things to you, then you're not gonna make it. Yeah. So it's almost like a test. Yeah. So you can use that like, well, I'll show them. But would you encourage women to get into the industry, or would you say, hey, watch out for this? Or
I mean,
how do you make the work-life balance? Or you just realize like,
I wouldn't do it with little kids. I mean, personally, I think that's tough. My kids were all high schoolers, or older, not older. When I started, the youngest was 9, and the hours are tough, being in the weekends.
I mean, that's part of the reason I left Verizon, because I had to work the weekends, Saturdays, half of Sundays. So my days off were always middle of the week. Mm-hmm. And then being gone for 2-3 meals, that was rough. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess you just come to a point, either you accept that as your way of life.
You do.
Or you don't. And so for me, I never did. Right. I was like...
I made good money, so...
Yeah.
So I stayed and made everything else work. And the nice thing about having the longevity, I have flexibility. So if I need a Sunday off, I'll take a Sunday off.
The other salespeople are probably like, don't come in, please. How much walk-in, I guess percentage of your business now is walk-in versus just referral?
Right now, it's...
Like, how did you get me? Or how did I get you? Who was the lucky one?
I don't know.
I don't know. Was it a phone call?
Might have been a phone call. I think you might have called because you had been working with Tacoma.
Yeah.
Where you bought.
So you were just in a line or round robin?
Yeah.
And it was your turn and you got the call?
We take turns.
So you are still getting the business?
Oh, yeah. I would say repeat and referrals probably almost half. Mm-hmm. It varies. Like some months I can have almost everything being from repeat and referrals, and then a little bit.
But that's probably what separates you from a lot of other, not just in your dealership, but from just that, comparing yourself to other salespeople. It's because you're going to get a lot of referrals that can make up for months where you get less walk-ins.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have to depend on walk-ins.
So having been in for 25 plus years now, is there certain, from the consumer side, is there a certain month or a certain time of the month that people should come in if they want a better deal? Does that stuff matter?
It can matter. With Subarus, we don't do a lot of sales and stuff. So I always say, if we have the car you want to buy, this is probably the best time to buy it. But end of year closeouts, at the end of a 24 is a good time, because then a lot of times the interest rates might be lower on that car. End of the year, if there's...
I was talking to the guy in the sauna who's the finance guy, and he's like, I can get you $15,000 off MSRP on new cars. So then I went and looked at the place.
What car does he sell?
Well,
I want 50,000.
Well, then when I looked at the place, and it was the 2023 model, and you're like, it's a new car, but it's just been on the lot for so long that they're like, we need to get this off. And it's like, if you want to buy a 2023 car in the end of 2024, then you can get a good deal, I guess.
Sure.
But
Subaru will never be that car.
Yeah.
We do not.
That was like the Hyundai and the models that aren't as popular. Because he made it sound like that was crazy, and I was like, how's that possible? Oh, it's just been on the lot for over a year and a half.
The manufacturer's got to give them a lot of incentive to get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, so you're at where you are in life today.
Yep.
And I know I never ask people if they have regrets, but what are things that you've learned as you've gotten older in life that you're like, that would have been helpful to understand when I was younger? Here's an example. For myself, in my 30s, that's when I really started understanding protein, macronutrients. I started understanding that stuff better in my 30s, where had I understood it better in my 20s, I could have made different decisions based off of understanding just how the human body works. So that's a personal example.
Yes. Health is a big deal.
Yeah.
I think the younger you are to acknowledge good choices.
Mm-hmm.
We're big into water because you're 90% water.
Mm-hmm.
Got 7 trillion cells in there. They all need hydration. Yeah, health is huge. Start earlier, being smarter about it. Probably money wise, tuck a little bit away all the time rather than wait till you're making more to save more. And at the end of the day, it's relationships. Don't be so focused on things, even careers over your relationships, because those really matter. And I think you don't get on your deathbed regretting that you didn't buy the Lamborghini. You might regret that you didn't spend enough time with your kids or your spouse, that you didn't do the things you really wanted to do, because you don't take money with you. So you have to prioritize what is really important. And we've gained and lost over the years because my husband is a risk taker. And I used to say to myself, well, what's the worst thing that could happen in this decision? Could I live with that? Yeah. Okay. Whatever happens, it's just money. I think we get too focused on things and possessions and income, and you come in naked, you leave naked.
Mm-hmm.
Just make wise decisions as much as you can, but the things that really matter are people. That's why in my job, for me, it matters that about the person I'm with. And a lot of times people tell me their life story. Like, I feel like I'm the interview, and I learn. I mean, it's so great. I have such amazing customers, and I love hearing what their struggles are, what their life is, what their hopes and dreams are, because that's more important than the car they buy.
Mm-hmm.
That's my job, but I love meeting people and getting to know them. So I think that's the advice, is just focus on the things that are important.
When there's a lot of young people struggling today. Was that when you were young? Did you feel like people were struggling as much as
yeah, we were poor. We struggled.
What I'm trying to understand is that just a thing with every generation, where there's
my kids are way better off at the ages they are, even than we were at their ages. So my kids have done well.
Yeah.
Financially, career-wise.
And you would hope that
I think the opportunities are great today. And I don't know. But I think struggling is a good thing. It builds character.
Yeah, but I think the things that people are struggling with today are depression and meaning and purpose.
And financially
struggling.
Yeah.
And I think you've answered it, where it's like, especially when you're always in your life, but especially when you're young, you can't be so focused on yourself, because
everything's self today. Yeah, and that's why we're in the depression and anxiety, and because if you constantly look inward, how do you, like, the best thing to do is do something for someone else, because the more inward you are, the more isolated you'll be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the sad thing about our society today is there's not a lot of community. You have to somehow be in a community. Big family. My dad was one of 12.
Wow.
So I had 50 cousins on one side. I think that community is something bigger than you, right? There's something you're a part of that's bigger than you. And your decisions affect more people. There's that ripple effect, when you make a bad decision, it just goes out and affects other people.
What about keys to a good marriage? Divorce is a very common thing. It's almost 60% now, and in divorce.
It's much easier than staying together.
And I'm assuming you guys probably went through some hard times.
Oh yeah, lots.
And what helped you get through those hard times where you realize it's worth sticking together?
Our kids. I think every marriage will have challenges and times where you're either frustrated or not connecting. But the damage it does to children to separate and to try to, yeah, it's worth it to figure it out and work it out. As Ruth Graham, Billy Graham's wife, said, she was asked, have you ever considered divorce? And she goes, divorce? No. Murder?
Yeah.
It's just, it's going to be hard because life is hard and you're two different people that have to mesh. And I think the main things are you have to agree on the main things. We have faith in God. That's number one. So that makes us committed to each other, to a higher purpose and plan. And we're committed to our children, and that's part of it. Financially, it's way harder to divorce. Wouldn't want to deal with that either. Communication and finding things you like to do together. It's very important, having good times together. We like to travel now. Wednesday nights, there's a little restaurant that has live music. We love live music. It's walking distance. We can go.
Yeah, how did life change once the kids were gone? I try to get my wife to start thinking about that. She's like, I'm too busy.
That's too busy. And it's tough. You know, the high school years are so great, so fun. My son played quarterback for the football team, you know, and going to football games on Friday nights. I miss that so much. Still do. That's a fun time. You just got to really enjoy that. But it's also a time where you can, as a couple, grow apart because your kids are so, especially with 4, you have a lot going on. So there was an adjustment there when the kids were gone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because all of a sudden you're like, it's you and me.
Yeah. And then, I guess, what do you look for in the future as far as, so you are where you are now. I guess what gives you hope for the future? Is it the grandkids or just, what motivates you for the future?
It's a very good question because as I'm in my 60s now, I start thinking, well, at work they call me the Energizer Bunny because I go. I have a lot of drive and energy, and I don't think I could sit around at home and not do something.
Can't really do part-time car sales either.
No, not really. Yeah, it's a very good question. Grandkids are a big deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're local?
I have 3 local and 4 in Oregon.
It's not too far, but far enough for it's a
every
trip.
few months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this podcast is called the Game of Life, and you've kind of already answered it, but to you, life is ...
Well, above family, which is kind of my first reaction, life is family. Life is faith. I think, because some people don't have family and that's tough. But if you have faith, you have life. Mm-hmm. You have a future, you have a hope. To know that this world isn't the end, that would be tough, you know, because it's pretty messed up. And a lot of people are struggling, like you said. And to not have faith and not have hope and love, those 3 things.